What if your most destructive vice was actually a divine gift in disguise? It sounds absurd, but there's a perspective that will completely change how you see your falls. Carl Jung discovered that when we stop fighting our shadows and finally surrender, we activate a profound psychological process he called individuation through descent. Picture this. Every time you fall into the same vicious pattern, your psyche is desperately trying to show you something. Jung observed that our vices are compensations from the unconscious, urgent messages from the soul that have been ignored for so long they had to manifest as compulsions. And here's the shock. When you finally surrender completely, without resistance, something extraordinary happens in your unconscious. This isn't about romanticizing self-destruction. It's about understanding that there's a specific psychological karma that only appears in total surrender. Some discover that the vice was the tortuous path to finding their true nature. Others realize too late that surrender revealed exactly what they'd been trying to hide their entire life. Have you ever wondered why that specific vice chose you? Not the other way around. Jung discovered something that will shake your understanding of addiction and compulsion. He called it the shadow, that rejected, hidden part of your personality that lives in the unconscious. But here's what most people don't understand. Your shadow doesn't just sit there quietly, it gets hungry, and when it's starved long enough, it starts eating you from the inside out. Think about this for a moment. Every single time you swear, you'll never do it again. Every time you promise yourself that tomorrow will be different, you're actually feeding a psychological civil war inside your mind. Jung observed that the psyche operates on a principle of compensation. When you push something down too hard, the unconscious pushes back twice as strong. Your vice isn't your enemy attacking you, it's your own soul screaming to be heard. The unconscious speaks in symbols and actions, not words. When you find yourself reaching for that drink, that screen, that toxic relationship, or whatever form your particular demon takes, you're not weak. You're receiving an urgent telegram from the deepest part of your being. You've noticed that people who developed the strongest compulsions were often those who had rejected fundamental aspects of themselves. The religious person who becomes consumed by lust. The controlled person who loses themselves in chaos. The helper who becomes helplessly addicted. But why does the unconscious choose such destructive messengers? Because you wouldn't listen to anything else. Jung understood that the psyche will use whatever means necessary to achieve wholeness. If you won't integrate your shadow voluntarily, it will force integration through crisis. Your vice is the language your unconscious learned to speak because it was the only language that got your attention. Here's where it gets even deeper. That specific vice that haunts you, it's directly connected to your unlived life. Jung believed that we all carry within us not just who we are, but who we could have been. All those roads not taken, those parts of yourself you had to kill to survive childhood, to fit into society, to be loved, they don't disappear. They transform into hunger, and that hunger manifests as compulsion. When someone spends hours lost in fantasy through gaming or pornography, they're not just escaping reality. Their psyche is desperately trying to live out archetypal experiences that their conscious life has denied them. The workaholic isn't just avoiding family. They're trying to find the meaning and purpose their soul craves, but can't find elsewhere. Every vice is a twisted attempt at self-medication for a spiritual wound. Jung saw this pattern everywhere in his patients. The more civilized and adapted someone appeared on the surface, the more savage and primitive their shadow became. The more they preached virtue, the darker their hidden vices. This isn't hypocrisy, it's psychological law. The psyche demands balance. Deny it consciously, and it will take it unconsciously. What makes this message from the unconscious so powerful is that it knows exactly where you're weakest. Your vice targets the exact spot where your persona, that mask you wear for the world, is most disconnected from your true self. It's like the unconscious found the crack in your armor and keeps pressing until either the armor breaks or you do. The karma here isn't punishment, it's revelation. Every time you surrender to your vice, you're actually getting closer to understanding what your soul really needs. Not the vice itself, but what the vice represents. The alcoholic doesn't need alcohol. They need the dissolution of rigid boundaries. The sex addict doesn't need sex. They need intimate connection with life force energy. The gambler doesn't need the bet. They need to feel truly alive in uncertainty. This is why willpower alone never works long term. You're not fighting against some external evil. You're fighting against a part of yourself that's trying to save you from a life half-lived. The message your vice carries is this: you cannot amputate parts of your soul and expect to remain whole. Whatever you exile into the shadow will return as fate. Now we enter territory that will challenge everything you believe about right and wrong. Jung discovered that the psyche has its own morality, completely different from society's rules. He called this process compensation. The unconscious always moves toward balance, even if that balance comes through what we call vice or sin. What if your addiction isn't a curse, but a harsh teacher sent by something greater than your ego can comprehend? Jung observed that life itself seems to conspire to bring us exactly the experiences we need for psychological growth. Not the experiences we want, but the ones our soul requires. He noticed that the very things we judge as failures often become the doorways to transformation. Your vice might be the universe's way of forcing you to confront what you'd otherwise spend your entire life avoiding. Consider how perfectly targeted your particular weakness is. It's almost supernatural how precisely it hits the exact area where you need to grow. The control freak develops an uncontrollable habit. The people pleaser finds themselves in selfish addiction. The perfectionist falls into the messiest possible vice. This isn't coincidence. Jung believed this was the self, the archetype of wholeness, orchestrating your development through whatever means necessary. The universe doesn't care about your comfort. It cares about your completion. Jung saw that individuals who went through the deepest struggles with their shadows often emerged with the greatest gifts to offer humanity. The wounded healer archetype isn't just a metaphor. It's a psychological reality. Your vice is creating a wound that, if properly integrated, becomes the source of your greatest strength. Think about the strange synchronicities that appear around your vice. The way certain people appear in your life at exactly the moment your struggle intensifies. The way opportunities for indulgence present themselves just when you thought you were free. The way consequences arrive with almost mathematical precision. Jung called these meaningful coincidences synchronicities, and they cluster around our biggest psychological challenges. This divine compensation works through what Jung termed the transcendent function. It's the psyche's ability to unite opposites and create something entirely new. Your vice forces you to hold two opposing truths simultaneously. You are both the saint and the sinner, the hero and the villain, the divine and the degraded. This tension, unbearable as it is, creates the conditions for genuine transformation. The universe uses your vice to teach lessons that couldn't be learned any other way. Humility can't be taught to someone who's never fallen. Compassion can't be truly understood by someone who's never struggled. Strength can't develop without resistance. Your vice provides all of these teachings, compressed into experiences that burn themselves into your soul. What's even more profound is how your personal struggle connects to the collective unconscious. Jung discovered that we don't just carry our own shadows, we carry pieces of humanity's shadow. Your particular vice might be your portion of the collective darkness to transform. The alcoholic isn't just healing their own relationship with escape, they're healing a piece of humanity's tendency to flee from reality. This is why shame is so toxic to healing. Shame assumes your vice is a personal failing, a sign of weakness unique to you. But Jung understood that your struggle is archetypal. Millions throughout history have faced your exact demon in different forms. You're not failing at being human. You're participating in the human condition. Your vice connects you to the collective struggle of consciousness trying to know itself. The divine compensation also works through what seems like punishment, but is actually preparation. Every consequence of your vice, the lost relationships, the damaged health, the squandered opportunities, these aren't just random casualties. They're stripping away everything that isn't essential, everything that isn't truly you. It's a brutal process, but it's preparing you for a level of authenticity that comfort could never provide. Here's what's really happening when you surrender to your vice. You're entering what Jung called a night sea journey. It's a psychological death and rebirth that can't be avoided if you want to become whole. The vice is the vehicle that carries you into the underworld of your own psyche. And just like in the ancient myths, you can't emerge from the underworld unchanged. The universe's teaching through vice is paradoxical. It breaks you to remake you. It defeats you to show you what real strength is. It strips away your false identity to reveal your true nature. This isn't cruelty. It's the most profound compassion. The universe loves you enough to not leave you in comfortable incompleteness. Your resistance to the vice creates suffering. Your surrender to it creates consequences. But your conscious engagement with what it's teaching creates wisdom. This is the divine compensation. Not that you'll be rewarded for your suffering, but that your suffering itself becomes the reward when properly understood. The karma isn't what happens to you, it's what happens within you. There comes a moment in every person's dance with their demons when something inside breaks. Not breaks down, but breaks open. Jung called this the death of the ego, and it's the most terrifying and necessary experience a human being can go through. Your vice isn't just challenging your self-control, it's systematically dismantling every lie you've told yourself about who you are. The ego is that voice in your head that says, "I've got this. I'm better than this. I can stop anytime I want." It's the part that creates elaborate stories about why this time is different, why you deserve just one more indulgence, why you're not like those other people with real problems. But every surrender to your vice is actually the ego losing a battle it was never meant to win. Jung understood that the ego isn't equipped to handle the full power of the unconscious. It's like asking a child to hold back the ocean with their hands. What nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom is that it's not actually the bottom. It's a doorway. Jung observed that when people finally truly surrender, not the fake surrender where you're secretly still trying to control the outcome, but real surrender where you admit complete defeat, something profound shifts in the psyche. The ego stops trying to be the master and accepts its proper role as servant. This psychic death feels like the end of everything because the ego has convinced you that it is everything. That controlling voice, that constant narrator, that judge and jury of your every action, you've mistaken it for your true self. So when it starts to die, you feel like you're dying. The terror you feel when you can't stop your compulsion isn't just about the behavior itself. It's about the death of who you thought you were. Jung saw this process in mythology everywhere. The hero's journey always includes a descent into the underworld, a moment of absolute defeat. But modern society doesn't prepare us for this. We're taught to be strong, to persevere, to never give up. Nobody teaches us that sometimes the greatest strength is in allowing yourself to be completely broken. Your vice is forcing you to learn this lesson, whether you want to or not. The collapse happens in stages, like a building being demolished floor by floor. First, your ego loses control over the behavior itself. You swear you won't do it again, and you do. Then it loses control over the frequency. Once a month becomes once a week becomes every day. Then it loses control over the consequences. You start doing things you swore you'd never do, crossing lines you thought were uncrossable. Each stage of collapse is the ego being forced to admit it's not who it pretended to be. But here's the secret that changes everything. The ego was always an illusion. Jung knew that what we call I is just a tiny part of the total psyche, like the visible tip of an iceberg. Your vice is revealing how much of you exists below the surface. In the unconscious depths, the ego can't reach or control. The humiliation you feel is the ego realizing it's not the captain of the ship. It never was. By the way, if you're curious to go even deeper and integrate your shadows and light, check out the SIM Method ebook. It's a concise guide that can help you unlock your inner power in just 5 minutes a day. The link is in the first pinned comment below. This psychic death is especially brutal for people who've built strong, successful egos. The CEO who can run a company but can't stop gambling. The doctor who saves lives but can't save themselves from addiction. The parent who can raise children but can't raise themselves above their compulsion. The more impressive the ego's achievements, the more devastating its collapse. Jung understood this wasn't coincidence. The stronger the conscious position, the stronger the unconscious compensation. What makes this surrender so difficult is that society rewards ego strength. We admire people who seem to have it all together, who never show weakness, who maintain control. But Jung discovered that this kind of rigid ego strength is actually psychological weakness. It's brittle. It can't bend, so it has to break. Your vice is applying the pressure that reveals this brittleness. During this psychic death, you might feel like you're going crazy. The old you is dying, but the new you hasn't been born yet. You're in what Jung called the void, the space between identities. This is why people in the depths of their vice often say things like, "I don't know who I am anymore," or "I don't recognize myself." They're right. The person they knew is dying. But this isn't the end of the story. The ego's collapse through vice serves a profound purpose. It's creating space for something larger to emerge. Jung called this larger thing the self. Not the ego self with a small s, but the total self with a capital S. This self includes everything, your light and shadow, your conscious and unconscious, your virtue and vice, but it can't emerge until the ego gets out of the way. Your vice is the force that moves the ego aside, whether it wants to move or not. Now we enter the realm of the truly strange. When you finally surrender to your vice, really surrender, the universe starts behaving in ways that defy logical explanation. Jung called these meaningful coincidences synchronicities, and they cluster around moments of psychological transformation, like iron filings around a magnet. The karma you activate through surrender isn't just internal. Reality itself seems to reorganize around your psychological state. Think about the last time you truly gave in to your shadow. Not the times you slipped up while trying to stay strong, but the time you completely surrendered, when you stopped fighting altogether. Didn't the world seem to conspire in the strangest ways? The exact person you needed to meet appeared. The perfect book fell off the shelf. The conversation you overheard contained exactly the words you needed to hear. Jung discovered this isn't your imagination. It's the psyche and matter revealing their hidden connection. Synchronicities around vice follow patterns that would seem impossible if you didn't experience them yourself. The alcoholic who surrenders completely and randomly meets someone who becomes their sponsor. The gambler who loses everything and finds a job opportunity in their moment of absolute defeat. The sex addict who hits bottom and discovers their behavior was connected to a childhood trauma they'd completely forgotten. These aren't coincidences. They're the universe responding to psychological necessity. Jung understood that the inner and outer worlds are not as separate as we think. He called this principle unus mundus, one world. Your psychological state doesn't just affect your perception of reality. At deep levels, it affects reality itself. When you surrender to your vice, you create what Jung called a constellation in the psyche. This constellation has such powerful energy that it attracts corresponding events in the external world. The synchronicities often come in waves. First, you might notice small things. Songs on the radio that speak directly to your situation. Numbers that keep repeating. Animals that appear at significant moments. These seem dismissible at first. But as your surrender deepens, the synchronicities become impossible to ignore. People from your past reappear. Opportunities that seemed dead resurrect themselves. Doors that were locked suddenly open. What's happening is that your surrender has activated an archetype. Jung discovered that archetypes aren't just psychological patterns. They're organizing principles that affect both psyche and matter. When you fully surrender to your vice, you activate ancient patterns that have been playing out since humans first developed consciousness. You're not just Bob or Susan with a drinking problem. You're participating in the eternal dance between order and chaos, death and rebirth, dissolution and crystallization. The karma of synchronicity works both ways. When you're in resistance, fighting against your shadow, synchronicities seem to work against you. Every temptation appears at the worst possible moment. Every weakness gets tested when you're most vulnerable. It's like the universe is conspiring to break your resistance. But when you surrender, the synchronicities shift. They start supporting transformation instead of forcing collapse. Jung noticed that synchronicities often appear as compensations for conscious attitudes. If you're too rational, the synchronicities will be impossibly irrational. If you're too spiritual, they'll be embarrassingly mundane. They always bring what the psyche needs for balance. Your vice-related synchronicities are showing you aspects of reality your ego refused to see. The people who appear during your surrender are particularly significant. Jung believed that we project parts of our unconscious onto others. When you're in the grip of vice, you attract people who embody aspects of your shadow. The enabler who keeps you sick, the rescuer who prevents you from hitting bottom, the judge who confirms your self-hatred, but also the guide who's walked this path before. The friend who sees your light even in your darkness. These aren't random meetings, they're synchronistic appointments. Sometimes the synchronicities are so precise they seem like divine intervention. The exact amount of money appears when you need it most. The health crisis forces you to stop. The relationship ends at exactly the moment you need to face yourself. Jung would say these events were always going to happen. Your psychological state didn't cause them, but it synchronized with them. Your inner and outer worlds were dancing to the same rhythm. The karma here operates outside normal causality. It's not that your actions cause specific results in a linear way. Instead, your psychological state creates a field of possibility where certain events become more likely. When you surrender to vice, you're not being punished or rewarded by some external force. You're participating in a larger pattern that includes both your individual psychology and the collective movements of the universe. What makes these synchronicities so powerful is that they appear at exactly the moment when the rational mind has given up. The ego, in its collapse, can't explain them away. They pierce through denial and rationalization like arrows of meaning. Each synchronicity is a message that you're not alone in your struggle, that your personal battle is connected to something infinitely larger than yourself. There's a moment in every addiction story that nobody talks about. It's not the rock bottom. It's not the recovery. It's that strange twilight moment when the very thing that's destroying you starts to reveal itself as medicine. Jung discovered something that sounds like madness, but proves itself true. Sometimes we need to be wounded in exactly the right place for healing to begin. Your vice isn't just breaking you randomly. It's creating a specific wound that paradoxically becomes the source of your healing. Think about where your vice strikes. It's always your point of greatest pride, isn't it? The successful businessman loses everything to gambling. The perfect mother becomes consumed by wine. The spiritual teacher falls into sexual compulsion. This isn't the universe being cruel. Jung understood that our greatest strength often grows rigid and becomes our greatest weakness. The vice attacks this rigidity like a surgeon cutting out a tumor. It hurts like hell, but it's precise. The wound your vice creates is unique. No two people break in exactly the same way. Jung called this the individual pattern of transformation. Your particular wound, the specific way your vice humbles you, breaks you, reshapes you, is creating an opening that couldn't exist any other way. It's like a key that only fits one lock. The wound is the key. Your transformation is the lock it opens. What we call relapse is often the wound trying to complete its work. Every time you think you're healed and you fall again, the wound is going deeper. Jung saw that superficial healing actually prevents real transformation. It's like putting a bandage on an infected wound without cleaning it first. The infection has to be exposed to air, to light, no matter how painful that exposure is. Your repeated falls aren't failures. They're the psyche insisting on complete, not cosmetic healing. The wound teaches compassion in a way comfort never could. Before your vice brought you low, you might have judged others who struggled. You might have thought they were weak, lacking willpower, morally inferior. But now, broken by your own shadow, you understand. The wound your vice creates connects you to the universal human struggle. You can't judge others when you've been face down in your own mud. This isn't punishment. It's initiation into true humanity. Jung noticed that wounded healers are the most effective healers, not despite their wounds, but because of them. The therapist who's battled depression understands depression. The sponsor who's been through hell knows the terrain. Your wound, created by your vice, is preparing you to help others in ways that someone who never struggled couldn't. But first, the wound has to complete its teaching. The destruction phase feels endless when you're in it. Every day, another piece of your old life crumbles. Relationships die. Opportunities disappear. Health deteriorates. Hope fades. But Jung understood this isn't meaningless destruction. It's what alchemists called the nigredo, the blackening. Everything has to be reduced to prima materia, the original matter, before it can be transformed into gold. Your vice is the fire that performs this reduction. Here's what's actually happening during the destruction. Every false support is being removed. All the things you use to prop up your ego, to maintain your false identity, to avoid facing your true self, they all have to go. The job that defined you, the relationship that distracted you, the health that let you ignore mortality, the reputation that kept you trapped in others' expectations. Your vice is ruthlessly efficient at destroying everything that isn't essential. The wound also serves as a strange attractor for grace. Jung observed that help often arrives at the moment of greatest desperation, not before. It's as if the wound has to reach a certain depth before it can receive what it needs. The prayer of the desperate is different from the prayer of the comfortable. The wounded person is open in ways the defended person can't be. Your vice creates this opening through destruction, but the wound isn't just personal. Jung discovered that we carry ancestral wounds, family patterns that repeat through generations. Your vice might be healing something that started long before you were born. The alcoholism that runs in families, the patterns of abandonment, the cycles of abuse. When you wrestle with your vice, you're not just healing yourself, you're potentially breaking chains that have bound your lineage for generations. The transformation happens at the cellular level. The wound changes you so fundamentally that you literally become a different person, not metaphorically, literally. Your brain rewires, your nervous system recalibrates, your very DNA expression changes. Jung intuited what science now proves. Profound psychological experiences alter our biology. The wound your vice creates goes all the way down to your molecular structure. And now we arrive at the secret hidden in the heart of every addiction, every vice, every shadow behavior that's ever consumed a human being. Jung called it individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, not who you thought you were or who others needed you to be. But here's what most people never understand. Sometimes the only path to individuation leads straight through the chaos of complete surrender to your shadow. After everything burns, something unexpected happens. In the ashes of your old life, something starts to grow. But it's not what you think. It's not a return to who you were before the vice. It's not even a better version of your old self. It's something entirely new. Jung discovered that genuine transformation doesn't improve the old structure. It replaces it entirely. The person who emerges from the ashes shares your memories, but is fundamentally different from who entered the fire. The rebirth starts quietly. So quietly you might miss it at first. Maybe you notice that the compulsion doesn't grip you quite as tightly, not because you're fighting it better, but because something inside has shifted. The war is ending not through victory, but through transcendence. You're not conquering your vice. You're outgrowing the entire battlefield where that war was fought. Jung understood that individuation can't be forced or faked. It happens when it happens, usually after the ego has exhausted every strategy, every defense, every attempt at control. The chaos your vice created wasn't random. It was preparation. Like tilling soil before planting, the chaos broke up the hardened patterns of your psyche. Now something new can grow, but what grows isn't what the ego planned. It's what your soul needed all along. The person reborn through vice carries a special kind of wisdom. They know things that can't be learned from books or teachers. They know what it's like to be completely lost and find a light in the absolute darkness. They know the taste of their own shadow, the weight of their own evil, the cost of their own unconsciousness. But they also know the reality of grace, the possibility of transformation, the fact that death isn't the end. This knowledge can't be taught. It has to be lived. The individuation that emerges from chaos is marked by what Jung called the transcendent function. You develop an ability to hold opposites without choosing sides. You can be strong and vulnerable, wise and foolish, saint and sinner, all at the same time. The vice forced you to experience your own multiplicity. Now you don't have to pretend to be simple anymore. You can be whole, which means being everything, not just the good parts. Your relationship with the vice itself transforms completely. It might still be present in your life, but it's no longer your master. Jung would say you've integrated the shadow. The energy that was locked in the compulsion is now available for conscious use. The destroyer has become a teacher. The enemy has become a strange kind of friend. Not that you indulge it, but you understand it. You know what it was trying to tell you all along. The rebirth reveals that your vice was never the real problem. It was a symptom of something much deeper, the split between who you really are and who you were trying to be. The addiction was your soul's rebellion against a life that was too small, too false, too disconnected from your true nature. Now, reborn through the ashes, you can live authentically. Not perfectly, but genuinely. Not without shadow, but with integrated shadow. Thank you for your attention. Take care and see you later.